no sorcerer, but I'll gladly test your steel, old friend.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the Restitutor Orbis live stream for the week, and we are returning to the Civil War based on your request. Surprised and maybe not surprised at the same time to see a request for a continuation on it. So I thought what we would do is I would share my current theory on the U.S. Civil War. Now, normally I'm not so keen on doing this because I prefer to let you all come to your own conclusions. Hey, RB, good to see you. But I'm going to share that with you because we already covered a lot of the mysterious aspects about what the United States Civil War was in last week's exploration. So in this week's exploration, I'm going to share what my current theory is. So the current theory that I have on this goes to the 5 eras timeline. Now, for those of you who are newer to the channel, you may not be familiar with it, but this is the primary theory that I use to explore the old world. Now, it doesn't mean that I discount other things such as alternative realities or different timelines and things like that. And oftentimes I notice there's a lot of criticism from certain people on that, and that's perfectly fine. This is just what I think. I may be wrong, and I'm fully willing to admit that. But the 5 eras timeline is a way to really look at how a civilization has developed. It posits that there were 5 different civilizations, and I could be completely wrong about this. It could have been the same civilization from the 1st through the 4th era, and they just built on top of the remains of the previous portions, or they just kept improving, and then there was a massive collapse or just a single reset as opposed to 4 resets. And who knows, maybe there's 90 resets for all we know. It's a theory. It's a way to look at things. But what I think about the United States Civil War is it was part of a vast series of conflicts that we're told that were going on in the mid 1800s. Now, it's what we think of as the 1800s because from 1750 all the way to 1900, that timeline seems to be very amorphous. It's very difficult to pinpoint things, and we do not have any firsthand sources. And as someone who worked in history for a long time, I can tell you that there's a lot of reevaluation of history. And if you don't believe me, look at how the perspective of World War II has changed in the last 40 years. Just look at the performance of different armies, the reason for different events happening. That's kind of how history tends to work. And what's the United States Civil War? It was part of this series of conflicts in the mid 1800s, and this is what was happening in the United States. Now, were there 2 definitive sides, or was this even a war? Was this actually just a post-reset event, which is what I've posited before, where they were utilizing the 3-step approach: conflict, assimilation, and indoctrination in order to achieve their ends? So we'll move on to our first image here, and I wanted to address the service of women soldiers in the Civil War. And this isn't something I find particularly mysterious or fantastic, and I'm going to explain why. Because in many different sectors of history, in every single conflict, there's many situations, records, and reports of women serving in the armed forces, even before it was supposedly acceptable. I mean, we can go all the way back to the legend of Molly Pitcher in the Revolutionary War. Not a legend, but they say she really existed. So I don't find women soldiers in the Civil War that particularly disturbing or fantastic. I find it status quo. I mean, women serve in the military now across the lands. There's nothing. Then you have other pictures like this. I mean, again, you just see all these army camps, but really strange because this looks like a very disorganized army camp to me. I mean, look at some of these individuals and what they're wearing. I mean, yeah, you've got stacked muskets, rifles over here, but just a very bizarre photo. And of course, we'll be told, well, it's because of limitations in photography at the time. Although then we've got conflicting accounts with that. You know, were they altered? Were they modified? Or are these the actual photos? You know, and the answer is I don't know. This is a really interesting one because this is supposedly a picture of a Confederate soldier from the Jefferson Davis Regiment. And yet, oddly enough, you look at the belt here and what do you see? And the answer for that will be, well, you know, they were using U.S. equipment, even though the regular United States Army was very pathetically small before the United States Civil War. And the state militias sure wouldn't be using something that said U.S., or would they? I mean, it's just one of those weird details. Also, you see how the hands look compared to the face and the age of this soldier. And what's he using here? I mean, this isn't a bayonet. Is this a gladius or something? I mean, what are your thoughts on this particular image? Yeah, exactly. Roman gladius, you know, close quarter combat, in case you needed it. Well, I'm glad you're enjoying it, Rory. I'm glad you're enjoying it. It's all good. It's all good. And I mean, these are just the kind of questionable images you have. I mean, what were the age of the soldiers? Why on earth were they using child soldiers? Because we'll see some more as we go on. And yet it's conflicting account galore. You just can't get enough of it. Yeah, there you go. That was actually his name. My name is Jeff. I'm Jeff Davis with the South, and that's where it all came from. Yeah, and that's an interesting theory too, Timothy, and certainly don't want to gloss over that. Hey, Dunbag, good to see you. And there are a lot of Civil War artifacts out there, but there's a lot of conflicting accounts with them as well. So moving on to the next image that we have. Now, this is one of the rare images that we have of Confederate soldiers that are supposedly mustering. And I mean, you look at this and, I'll just say that this looks like what the US Army would call a gaggle right now. I mean, there doesn't seem to be any sort of military order here. Everyone's just sort of showing up. They got their rifles. I mean, when you think of the term militia, this is what you'd expect to see. Everyone's just kind of holding their weapons. They're there, but we're also expected to believe that the Confederate units were relatively well trained and they had a reputation for being able to go toe to toe with the mighty United States Army. But was that what was really happening, or was it something else? Was this really a resistance, or was this just a small group of people who were trying to defend their enclave from an attack? I mean, what makes more sense? And then you compare and contrast this image with what we saw earlier. Now, again, these look to be a little bit better equipped soldiers, although we don't have the line trousers anymore, but they still have full uniforms, tents. Again, is this something that is a staged photo, or is this a real campaign photo? This almost gives the impression of being a little bit more real. I mean, it doesn't look like a background, but who knows given the quality of the image. And this is one of my favorite ones because this is the U.S. Capitol in Washington, D.C. And here we have what actually looks like a military formation. I mean, look at the detail on these uniforms. I mean, we've got everything. Everyone's holding their weapons very uniform. This actually looks like a true military formation. Was this the regular United States Army at that time? Well, a lot of times they'll tell us, no, it was the Washington, or actually, I should say, the Maryland militia that was turning out to defend the Capitol. They're the ones who answered Lincoln's call, according to the official history. Very interesting look on the Capitol, though. What are your thoughts on that? Yeah, good point there, Jamie. They are a little clean. And it's really weird too because it goes down to conflicting accounts again. I mean, is this a militia? Is this something else? I don't know. Good to see you, Rod. Oh yeah. Well, and the fairs actually start slightly before them, but you're right, Easy Money. The really well-known ones don't start until well after the Civil War. So, oh yeah, you picked up on that, RB. Yeah, good one there. Very nice, worn down dirt road. Is there something under it? Who knows? But we got a dirt road right in front of this impressive national capitol that we're building right now because, you got nothing better to do. Oh, and by the way, they were doing that during the war because, why not? This is one of the Zouavi, and yes, I'm mispronouncing that very intentionally, but one of the strange uniforms that we supposedly saw during the Civil War. Now, I'm going to be honest, I was never even aware of this, and they certainly didn't cover this in the Civil War until I actually talked to a historian who showed me a random picture book of uniforms, and supposedly they wore uniforms like this. Really, really strange. Yeah, doesn't it? It does look like a Cossack, doesn't it? Well, thanks for joining us. Yeah, they claim that both North and South had these units that wore these really strange uniforms. So, oh yeah, and there's no shortage of some of that odd stuff. Yeah, maybe, or maybe some sort of remnant, a militia unit that reflected back to it. But I think there's a lot of misinformation that goes around about what we would consider Tartarian or Fourth Era civilization. There were certainly a lot of successor enclaves that may have claimed that they were the original rightful heirs and so forth, but maybe that didn't happen. Oh yeah, dragoons, great example there, Jamie. Yeah, special military unit that were supposedly involved all over the place. Yeah, it does kind of have that look to it, doesn't it? Yeah, I mean, just imagine keeping that uniform, real nice and clean, and you're going through all these dusty, dirty conditions, marching 15 to 20 miles every day. So just one of those really interesting things that comes down with it. Now we'll look at some of the pictures. I enjoy this one of the Confederate soldier. Look, he's got 3 rows of buttons, or it looks like he's wearing a coat over a uniform underneath it. Now, with these pictures, we could probably say these are a little bit more staged, but very interesting with what they tend to show us. Yeah, it does give that impression, doesn't it, Leonard? Certainly not what we'd be expecting to see in the United States in the 1860s or the 1850s. So that's okay, Shelby. I used to teach it. You should have seen how my department chair responded when I asked these kinds of questions. So, yeah, it does look like a catalog pick, doesn't it? Get your uniform, and here you are. And we're just looking at the first stage, current theory on the Civil War. You can see why it's very confused, though. Now, they even give us a picture here of a lottery. This is how they did the draft because, we had a draft in the Civil War, even though it didn't start until later. And then there were draft riots in New York. But of course, we have the photo of the individual with the big box. Now, here we have some of the drummer boys. And look how well equipped the drummer boys are. Now, would you be surprised to know that they tell us that these drummer boys are actually with the Confederacy? And I don't know if that's a mistake or if they were just wearing old equipment. Again, you look at little details like the hands and so forth, and you see conflicting accounts. I mean, they don't exactly look happy. Interesting building there in front of as well. I mean, so it's hard to say what's really going on here with these drummer boys for sure. Yeah, could be. And there's a lot of accounts of younger soldiers that served. Yeah. Yeah, I never did either. And that was only something from the Civil War, supposedly. So, hey, Naga. Oh, yeah. And that's part of what it all comes down to. And it's just a little bit of logic, too. It doesn't really even take that much, but you'll see it in these images. Here you have a sailor, and yeah, I'd say he's pushing about what, maybe 11 or 12. Oh, I know. Maybe this is the successor to Admiral Farragut, because remember, Admiral Farragut started when he was 9 to 11, so that wasn't so odd. We had midshipmen who were boys, because why not? Look, he's doing the Al Bundy thing there with the hands, so wonder why that is. And of course, we have one of these, what we're told is a Dahlgren gun here. Looks like it's pretty well maintained, too, although hard to say about the veracity of this image. You also see some of the interesting U.S. Navy uniforms, like the little heart here. You might remember the Captain America one we saw when we did the Civil War technology video. The Navy accounts in the Civil War are always very fascinating. Yeah. And it does get pretty dark when you continue to look into it and you really wonder what was going on. Yeah, that's exactly right. And even the North, because you got to remember that in the Civil War, the United States had never fielded a large army. They'd always had a small army. Even the War of 1812, all the Native American conflicts, were told they had a very small regular army. Yeah, they had militias, but they'd never done mass mobilization, and yet they were just able to pull it off. Yeah, that's true. I forgot about that. I am Kairos. He did, didn't he? Yeah, I agree. There is something a little off about this photo, so it's hard to say. But moving on. And so here we have one of the parade formations in Washington again. And so this is showing you that they could actually get a photo of a parade while they were moving. Now, granted, they're looking down the road, but you can still delineate the individual soldiers. You can see the weapons and the bayonets. So I don't know. I'm not so accepting of this fact that they couldn't get a single battlefield photograph, especially when we're told that the first 4 years of the war were primarily Napoleonic the first 2 to 3 years of the war were primarily Napoleonic tactics. They didn't get the trench warfare until the last year. But who knows what was really going on. But very interesting how you can see some of the images, and yet you look at some of these buildings here in Washington, D.C. Not really sure what's going on here. I mean, the Capitol's complete here, but they were supposedly still building it. So who knows about the date of this photo? The many hospitals, and of course I have to be careful because I have gotten in trouble because I showed a little, let's just say, 2 graphic photos from the Civil War for, the the standards here. So I just play it safe now. But yeah, the hospitals, the dreaded amputations, the people who were terribly wounded by weapons that were told really weren't effective. Yeah, maybe easy money. I'm sure there is. Well, and Sky Sage, I didn't really seem to be practicing that quite well. So it's really weird, not sure. I mean, if you go and watch Gods and Generals, that movie, I mean, they give you the impression that only the first battle, Bull Run, the very opening battles, they had the same uniforms as the North. They just had different flags, unit flags. That was the only way they could tell the difference. But then you have this account as the war goes on. Yeah, good point there. I am Kairos. It's hospital in ruins, maybe. You have accounts as the war goes on that certain northern units wore gray uniforms. Like, for example, the Iowa regiments, they all wore gray uniforms. And so there was a lot of confusion. And yet there are many battles they talk about this. So what the heck's going on? It's hard to tell. Yeah, I'm not really sure on this one. And I always enjoy these photos here. So it looks like everybody's just out chilling, having a good time. Maybe they got the barbecue going on. And to be fair, the modern United States Army, when, they're sitting on the forward operating base or the combat outpost, they really don't look that different. I mean, when they're a secure area, they chill out. But I find it interesting that they always seem to have these very well-developed folding chairs. And then look at this. You got the little bench here in front of the tent. I mean, yeah, we got to make sure we got the bench in front of the tent here. He just looks completely disinterested. I mean, really, they all look disinterested. Are we in a war or are we just kind of sitting here waiting? I mean, I could believe that because, yeah, there is a lot of that with conflict at any point in time. Oh, yeah. Going real safari style, but it's images like that that just cause you to question everything. You're not really sure what you're looking at. You know it, Rebecca. You know it. They had to, because what else were they going to do with all that time they had on their hands? So, oh, yeah, you noticed that. Yeah, I've gotten into that where I'm pointing out all these actors that I've seen. I've decided to do that a little bit more. I was surprised that I had a threesome here in the last exploration with the Erie Canal. It's funny to me, though, how much I see Willem Dafoe showing up. Yeah, pretty much. And that's something else that goes along with it. So, and make sure you hit that like button. I appreciate you being here. So back on the current theory with it. And then here you have this image. This is at Lee's house, which was occupied by the Union throughout the Civil War. And this became the main building at Arlington Cemetery. And I think this is an early photo. Look, somebody here is doing the Commander Riker knee up pose. And everybody's just so well dressed and well decked out. You got a top hat here. I mean, you got uniforms that compare with the modern dress uniforms of the United States Army. Everybody's got their sabers. Everybody's all dressed up. We got our facial hair combed just right. And you got another officer who looks bored. Maybe his date dumped him. I don't know. But anyways, look at the columns on this beauty, though. And this still stands to this day. Very beautiful building. So, yeah, if you can get to Arlington, you got some great old world buildings. All kinds of old world buildings, though, in the Washington area. Very, very interesting. Oh, yeah. Nope. Why would they be dirty? They had showers and everything. It's another one of those interesting images that causes you to ask all kinds of questions if you just take it at face value. Oh, yeah. Wooden steps. Good call out there, Joseph. Absolutely. Oh, yeah. All built before the Civil War, very easily. Who needs an industrial revolution? Who has any problems with that? Yeah, we just don't know. Now, this shows the approach to Gettysburg, although I question the veracity of this image. And we talked about the quality of the road. Now, this is kind of the road that we'd expect to see, more of an actual wagon path or something along those lines. And yet, if you look closely enough, what the hell does it need a sidewalk for? Well, you need to make sure you have a sidewalk along the side of it. I mean, it's not really a sidewalk. It's a dirt path for pedestrians. So, you don't get run over by the horses and the wagons going along real fast. I don't know, maybe. Or could it be that this is just dirt that's over something? I don't know. What are your thoughts? What you think about that one? And now we move on to our next portion. And that's the leaders and their purposes. And that's always interesting to ask because what was really going on with this Civil War? Oh, yeah. Well, and that's what you have to believe for all the logistics aspects on this. Now, one of the darker aspects of the Civil War, in addition to all the questions that we have with it, is the fact that many, I hate to say this because I love horses, but a lot of horses died in the Civil War. That's what they tell us. But then there's another logistical problem because if you have hundreds of thousands of horses dying, you're not just going to replace those horses. You just can't suddenly create 100,000 more horses. So pin on the collar. Yep, looking at a Confederate leader here. You can kind of see it looks like we got the 3 stars here. So maybe a colonel if we go off a Confederate rank. Interesting uniform, though. I mean, with the way the sleeves are. And remember, these are one of the uniforms that they created rather quickly. But what were the leaders really about during the Civil War? Were they actually serving the North and the South? Or was it just one military force, as we tend to get a lot of indications there were? So, yeah, exactly. But then you also get another oddity with some of the uniforms. So I commented on this before with kind of the quote unquote dress look uniform. I think this is where Star Trek The Next Generation got their dress uniforms from with this style. But I mean, right down to the really baggy pants and the odd looking shoes and even the odd looking floor here. And looks like we have Major General here, 2 stars. So if he's Union, 2 stars as Major General. Got the good old mutton chops, the Burnsides there. But who were these leaders? I mean, were they really part of a North and South, or were they actually part of a single military force on a single campaign? a campaign of eradication, destruction. And on that note, that takes us right into Ulysses S. Grant, the first full general in the United States Army. And I commented on that about how having ranking officers, the United States military didn't use its senior ranks until the Civil War exclusively, which is really, really odd, I always thought. I mean, why is that? Oh, yeah. And Grant has quite the reputation for exactly what he was doing and what he was involved in. Some people say he was a military genius. Other people say he was a butcher. He has that conflicted account in the Civil War. And why couldn't he be both? What if he was truly a military commander from whatever this military force actually was that existed, in what we think of as the 1860s, and did all this? But, was it a war, or was it simply an extermination policy? Relocation and all the other aspects that we have, destroying the enclaves, any of the people that survived the reset who were still stuck out there, and this military expedition was designed to destroy them. I suspect that's what a lot of it was about. But again, like I said, I could be wrong. And they always try to say that Ulysses S. Grant looks just out there in a lot of his looks. Now, this is supposedly from the Battle of Cold Harbor, where he supposedly tried frontal assault for a couple days and got thousands of Union soldiers killed with nothing gained from it. For some reason, he couldn't outmaneuver Robert E. Lee's army, even though he outnumbered him almost 2-1. I mean, it's really bizarre when you try to look at the military accounts of the Civil War. And this is one of the most interesting images, and this is one that they'll acknowledge was a fabricated image, because we've seen this image before behind Grant here. This is a prisoner of war camp, and they've superimposed him and his horse in here to make it look like he's involved in this. But this is one of those examples where they actually admit to altering what's supposed to be real historical photographs. So what are your thoughts on that? Oh, yeah. Good one, Sky Sage. Good one. Yeah. The point. Don't you forget it. Everybody makes the same mistakes. Frontal attack. It didn't work for the Union. It'll work for us, says Robert E. Lee. And that's what we're supposed to believe. Oh, yeah. All kinds of issues with this image show. And that's what they'll tell us. Oh, yeah, just accept it. Yeah, I don't even know what to make of that with the ghost horse. Just so many problems with this image. And it's just one of those things that you see a lot of. And I think that's kind of why they had to admit that this was just a fabricated image. Look, Horsey is disappearing between dimensions. It's a trans-dimensional horse. You got all kinds of crazy things going on here. But this is supposedly an image of a Confederate prisoner of war camp, and yet they superimpose Grant in front of it to make it look like he's in the conflict. So here's another image from Lookout Mountain. Now, you can go to Lookout Mountain today. It overlooks Chattanooga in Tennessee. And here we got old Grant over here just chilling and smoking a cigar because, I guess he had nothing better to do. And supposedly there were all these pictures taken at Lookout Mountain to give you the idea there was a war going on. So I don't know. And some of the other commanders that we have, they just look strange for their own reasons. And again, what was their real intention? What were they really about? So wearing gloves here, racing car gloves. What the heck? Unbutton. That's not very professional. I mean, I would never fly in the U.S. Army today. Major general, maybe a lieutenant general. I think major general. Everybody got the major general in the Civil War, and it's another one of the quote unquote dress uniforms. Israel B. Richardson, a Union commander from the early portion of the war. Doesn't he bear a striking resemblance to many modern actors? It kind of looks like, I don't know, maybe James Doohan in the later years, Scotty. I'm just flapping there. It's another one of those really bizarre things. Yeah, there you go, Julian. Yep. Dress gloves in case you have it. Oh, yeah. And it's just strange because you see this vast variance in uniforms. And so what exactly makes sense of that? Then just some of these really odd ones. I mean, look at this character over here. I guess he's in more of a dress uniform. It's a different uniform. It looks more like the dress mess that the United States Army wears to this day. Look at the look on this individual's eyes. Yeah, it looks like he's seen some stuff. So, I mean, again, are these, well, they're fighting a war, so they should have these long 1,000-yard stares. I mean, are they fighting a war, or are they in a policy of something else? Eradication, extermination. Again, unbutton buttons. What exactly is with that? Then I like this little 3 image here. And you want to talk about a solemn, gaunt-looking individual. Now, this looks like Christian Bale from The Machinist, if you ever saw that movie, where I think he got himself down to, I don't know, I think he was close to 100 pounds. I mean, he lost a lot of weight for the role. Look at how oddly sized this uniform is, though. Got a nice chair, though. And again, the really gnarled old hands for anybody of any age, whether you were 18 or 50 or who knows how old this individual is. You'd probably find out this individual is probably 28 years old. You know what I mean? It's just really strange. Yeah. Well, there you go. It almost seems like they did. And if that's the case, then, is it a series of militaries? Is it something else going on? It's just really hard to say. And yeah, there could be a lot to that. I mean, how long did fake photos exist? We just don't know. Oh, did I miss something there? Hey, thank you, Quantum Paradox. I really appreciate that. But yeah, it's one of those things that we don't know. All right, moving on back to the leaders because I had another little point I wanted to get to. So this is Lincoln's funeral. What do you think of this procession? I mean, a lot of people haven't seen the photographs of Lincoln's funeral after his assassination at the end of the Civil War, and they try to say that his assassination is what led to Reconstruction failing, the Northern occupation of the South, and the reason that Jim Crow laws and the continued oppression of African Americans in the South continued. They say that if Lincoln lived, well, they wouldn't have had such a difficult Reconstruction. Things might have been different, but very interesting funeral processions. Like, oh, look, have you ever seen anything like this? I don't know. I mean, is that supposed to be the gondola that's covering his casket? I'm not really sure. I mean, just any image, anything that you see from the Civil War does not match your expectations, before, after, during, or whatever. So, I mean, it's really hard to say. Yeah, and you know what? There's a lot of things that don't look quote unquote American about the Civil War. I mean, whether it's the uniforms or what. Yeah, I don't know, Polly. I mean, maybe it's a giant sarcophagus that he's going to come back to life. I really, really don't know. But just thought I'd share it with you because it's just another one of those things that just kind of stands out. So, but we have plenty of other images, north and south, that are like, I mean, what's this? Top hat? Go to war in your top hat? Is that not a civilian attire? Probably look closer at the belt. Who knows what you see with this one? But certainly no expense spared. Here's good old William Tecumseh Sherman. And, we always like to talk about how popular he is down south. Very interesting looks on these individuals, though. Just really chilled right down to the shoes. This supposedly is all staff. And I mean, they're all cleaned up like they just got out of the shower, had a bucket of water poured over them. I mean, basically any staff photo you see with William Tecumseh Sherman is really interesting. And supposedly he was a person who invented total war, declaring war on a civilian population, destroying cities, although somehow magically that seemed to happen all over and not just in the South, contrary to popular perception. So, yeah, well, why'd you want to look at the camera if you knew you were doing something that was just awful or terrible or ill-advised? This is Gordon Meade. He was the commander of the Union Army during the Battle of Gettysburg and didn't really have a lot of historical notoriety in the Civil War. And in the movie Gettysburg, I think he was in it for about 10 seconds. If memory serves, he was played by Richard Anderson, the guy that played Oscar Goldman in $6 Million Man. So yeah, he gets forgotten. He's got a little phantom flag over him. I mean, why not? Very fitting. Here's Custer. He became famous after the Civil War, and this is a West Point classmate of his that they captured, and they decided to sit for a picture together. Hey, buddy, I captured you. Let's pose for a picture. Yeah, and try to look cool. I'll put my elbow on my knee here. I mean, I guess you can say at least they're not putting their hands in their pants or their coats or anything, but really bizarre. I mean, they're just like they're having a grand old time, like they're just two friends, and barely any color difference between the uniforms. I mean, he's supposed to be in blue and gray, but I don't know. Could just be the image. Really strange. All right, so let's go on to our technological component of the Civil War. Oh, yeah. And we always know how we love to talk about the cannons and ironclads and everything. And here we have one of our nuclear mortars, I like to say. Now, question one, how did they move these around? Well, on a train track. Well, I don't see a train track anywhere near this one. Question two, how did they dismount this from the train and how did they set these up? Question three, how did they move these cannonballs around? Are we expecting to believe the gun crew here, these three guys picked up this one cannonball? Would it even fit in this mortar? Does it look like it would? I mean, what are your thoughts on this? It's another one of those anomalies with technology. Yeah, exactly. I mean, how do you lift that? Oh, brute force and ignorance. We got to get the ball in there. Otherwise, it's just not going to happen. Yep, precisely. No, I don't think they would fit. I really don't. It's another one of those technological inconsistencies that you have with the cannon. Now, the ironclads. I didn't really talk about this last week so much, but the first use of ironclad armored ships in the Civil War. Now, these were the river ironclads built by our friend, what was his name? Mr. Eads, who designed the Eads Bridge in St. Louis. He was one of the big designers of these ironclads. But yeah, we'll just put iron on ships, and that's how the Union was going to gain control of the Mississippi. Or does it make more sense that somebody was using refurbished technology? Because they sure seem to jump from wooden ships to this very quickly. It's really bizarre. And then we have all these paintings. Here's your Civil War battle. No one's going to sit in a ship and actually take a picture, when they're just sitting in the water and bombarding a fort. Who'd want to see that? We'll do a painting of it. It's a lot faster than taking a picture, right? Sorry, I just had to go there. Yeah, pedal faster. Yeah, and I think that's really what it was, Jamie. It was a lot of refurbishments and, getting technology back into gear. Well, of course it was. I am Kairos and cutting it and everything, you just learned it right away. Yep, your actual battle photograph. Had to have one of those, right? So, anyways. Oh, who is that? Why am I not catching these? It's not giving me a very good alert. Thank you for that, Michael Doyle. I really appreciate that. I need to stay on my A game here. I'm getting a little too carried away by this exploration. It's just a lot of fun doing the Civil War. So many questions. So anyway, back on technology. This is a good one. So this is supposedly one of the largest cannons available in the Civil War, and you can see that it's clearly been destroyed. What's going on back here with this wall? I mean, is this some sort of emplacement or position? And why is everybody just chilling here? I mean, what's going on? Were these individuals wounded and now they're just sitting here right below this cannon, not really doing anything? Look at the look on this one's eyes. This is always such an odd one to me. Then you got these two back here. Hey, look, they're just chilling up there. Maybe we should do the same thing. But it's just always so relaxed. I mean, if they're involved in an active battle, are you going to be that relaxed? Oh, yeah, sure. It's 1,000-yard stare. Okay, whatever. Yeah, I don't know. This is another one of those ones that just really drives me up a wall because it just doesn't make any sense. Yep, I'm with you, Quantum Paradox. It is definitely stage. So. And you get a lot of that, Kathy. A lot of that where it looks like there's just slackers out there, Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And it's just one of those that really stands out. So let's move on. Just one of those interesting ones where they just couldn't help it. Now, were those cannons able to inflict this kind of damage? And what people will tell you is because, well, there was wooden supports and frames in a lot of these concrete and brick buildings, and that's why they burned like this. Yeah, sure, whatever. I don't accept that. I reject that explanation entirely. Here's South Carolina. South Carolina really got beaten up badly. We got what looks to be a group of refugees here. Who really knows? More child soldiers by this very beautiful column that looks like it's been nicked. And then what's happened over here with this building? I mean, we can see what looks to be a concrete outer facade or some material like concrete and then bricks behind it. And I bet you could take one of those bricks to this day if you get your paws on it and drop it and compare it to a modern brick and then see the test. Yes, I have done that, but I haven't filmed it because it's one of those things that would get me in trouble. Don't ask why. Oh, yeah. Beyond any shadow of a doubt. I mean, what's wrong with it? Yeah, very thick walls. And again, it's more conflicting accounts of what we'd expect to see with the technology. So, oh, yeah. I mean, were they just lobbing rounds at it all day, Rebecca? I mean, how many rounds would it take to do that? Maybe. Or I've got another proposition: sound weapons, cymatics, used in a different way. And who knows? Maybe this conflict happened. We're seeing the remnants of the destruction that happened as part of the reset, and then the armies were moving in, and that's when they took these images. So, yep, that's what we'll be told. So, just very, very interesting on all that. All right, back to technology. Let me stay focused here. So again, these mortars that we have no idea how the heck they moved. I mean, you'd think you'd have to assemble it and disassemble it, and that's how you'd have to move it in components. But were they really firing? Not sure. Here we have a nice long line of cannons, and we have an African-American soldier who is oddly enough wearing gray, although it looks like he's got a blue cap on. But again, the overcoats were gray. Not confusing. No problem. Here's one of my favorite images. So you can see all the cannonballs, and who knows what the heck happened to this building. It was a building that held cannonballs that was hit and destroyed, and the cannonballs rolled all over the place. Yeah, okay. And then everybody's just chilling again. Stand here with my hands in my pocket. Ooh, look at this. Isn't this fun? I mean, what is going on with this image? It's really hard to tell. Yeah, Walls of Jericho. That's absolutely right. Oh yeah. And I mean, that's really what it looks like too. It's just another one of those strange things with a conflicting account that you just don't know. Yeah. Too many to count and too many to see. This is supposedly the smokestack to the CSS Virginia Confederate ship. But what I find interesting about the image is look at this bluff over here and some of the buildings that you have. And then you just have this random set of bricks here. I mean, I don't know what the heck's going on with this one. Got a soldier standing guard here. Not really sure what this is all about. Very strange. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, doesn't it? I mean, what's with all those little holes? Did they have some sort of shotgun shell, a beehive shell like they do in modern tanks? I don't know. It's really, really weird. Just more conflicting accounts about the technology and what they had available at that time. This is called a Sherman's necktie. So apparently, what we're told they did is they took railroad tracks, put them over logs because, you know, there were logs and wood to be found everywhere, set them on fire, and that's how they twisted them around so the South couldn't use them. But of course, then we're also told that, you know, not 20 years after the Civil War, Atlanta was built into an amazing, beautiful city. And you might remember that Georgia State Capitol was built in 4 years, 1883 to 1887. I'm shooting from the hip. I might be wrong, but I think it only took them 4 years to build it. And then more of these odd destruction photos. But again, if you consider what's really going on, if this is an authentic photo, then maybe what we're just looking at is a city that they've come and they've occupied after it was destroyed or it was found dead. Hey, thanks, Sooner West. I really appreciate that. Okay, it looks like I'm back on my A game right now, so tracking what's going on. And then here you go. Here's your battle photograph because you've got this painting because the painting tells you everything. Oh, yeah. And then another one of these destruction photos. So this is one of my favorites, though, because, I mean, what have you got here? Is this like some sort of bunker or a portal to somewhere, a pothole? This guy's coming out of the bunker. You know, you got some ships pulled up to the dock here, but then, I mean, look at this building. Look at some of the brickwork on this. And again, you know, we're told this is from the United States Civil War, but you got to remember this photo could be from any time. This could mean anything. And that's why I always tell you to keep open minds on a lot of these images, you know? Is this the occupation army landing to begin their extermination of the enclaves of what remained of the fourth era civilization? I mean, they were survivors. They weren't equipped. They weren't organized. You always have all this rubble here. It's just very strange and unique. And another one of our good old battlefield paintings. Oh, I just love these. Look, mortars firing. Yeah, that's the closest to that you'll ever see in a painting. Because nobody could stand back and get a picture. It's just a painting. I always enjoy those. Now, this is one of the big guns on Fort Wagner. You know, and one of the things that gets overlooked is some of the fantastic accounts from the Civil War. So, you know, not exactly sure exactly what's going on here, but the account with this is that in the Battle of Shiloh, which was a very bloody battle that Ulysses S. Grant was actually in command of the Union Army, and when they clashed against the Confederates, what we have this account of is that the Union and Confederate wounded who were sitting out there for days, their wounds actually started to glow. Hey, Abrams Killer, good to see ya. Oh, yeah. But it's a really strange account from the Battle of Shiloh when the wounds just started to glow and no one could really explain it. Yeah, exactly. Where are the airships? Now, oddly enough, they went further with this because after the Battle of Shiloh in 1862, they were saved by a phenomenon called Angel's Glow. The soldiers who lay in the mud for 2 rainy days had wounds that began to glow in the dark, and they healed fast. And then in 2001, just 23 years ago, 2 teams won an international science fair by discovering the soldiers had been so cold, their bodies created the perfect conditions for growing a bioluminescent bacteria, which ultimately destroyed the bacteria that could have killed them. Have you ever heard of this? Because when I found out about this, this was just utterly and completely bizarre. It's one of those things that just makes no sense to me. Yeah, I don't wonder if that's what it is. Some really odd technology. And the fact that they actually confirmed and corroborated this in the mainstream account is even more bizarre. That, yes, this really happened. They actually had wounds, and suddenly they started glowing, and it healed them. Because, you know, infection was supposedly the biggest killer in the Civil War, just past disease. So who knows exactly what was going on with this? It was very, very intriguing. And so I just wanted to share that with you. So, oh, yeah. Yeah. And maybe there is a radiological component to it. I mean, we don't know. Or is it some other technology or some old world technology that they were using to heal the wounded? Yeah. I mean, it could well be, just one of those fantastic accounts that's there. And, I mean, this is the closest you'll find to it. No, for some reason, nobody got a picture of this, but it is well documented. And they did say that it really happened. And they did find a scientific explanation with it. So make of it what you will. Next fantastic account. This is Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain. And if you've ever studied the Civil War, you've heard about him. He is the greatest Union hero in the United States Civil War, just past Grant and some of the generals. And the reason being is that he did the charge that saved Little Round Top in the very critical Battle of Gettysburg. And this is a photo, or rather a painting of that. Again, another painting of battlefield imagery. But what's interesting about, yeah, exactly. There's conflicting accounts about Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain and if he actually led the charge. And, oddly enough, it's always questioned. But did you ever know that during this charge, which is depicted in the movie Gettysburg, and you have Jeff Daniels playing Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain, and of course, C. Thomas Howell there right there with him as his brother. There were some accounts that say that some of the Union soldiers, now, if you're not familiar with what was going on here, they were fighting this desperate battle in Gettysburg in Pennsylvania. Lee's army invaded. And even though the Union army had suffered numerous other defeats, for some reason, this was a very critical point of the battle. If the Union lost Little Round Top for some reason, because it's key terrain, supposedly, even though how the Confederates would actually get cannons up there that would dominate the Union positions is another matter. Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain led this bold charge, and it saved the entire Union cause, and they gave him the Medal of Honor for it. Well, some of the soldiers say that they saw George Washington in place of Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain. So just put old Georgie up there. He was actually leading the charge. I am not making this up. There are some accounts that say that they saw George Washington leading it. And here's just some of the battlefield imagery that you'll see. And this is the closest to seeing battlefield imagery, is just, nice little blue and red dashes on a map. By the way, for those of you not familiar with NATO symbols, blue always means friendly, red always means enemy. So, of course, the Union is blue and red is the Confederates. But for some reason, when you actually analyze the terrain, we're told that Little Round Top, this hill, was very strategic, because if the Confederates captured it, they would be able to dominate the Union position, and they would by default win the Battle of Gettysburg. Because the Union would just give up. They wouldn't withdraw to other high terrain and try to keep fighting. Yes, George Washington. It's another one of those fantastic accounts. George Washington. And the whole reason I bring up fantastic accounts with the Civil War is they may be true. They may not be. It may be something else to obfuscate, to confuse us in terms of what was really going on. So that's why I wanted to share that portion with you. And Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain is very well known and well documented after the Civil War. And while he was a successful Union military commander, unlike Francis Marion Drake from Iowa that we looked at before, he became governor of Maine. Francis Marion Drake became governor of Iowa. And I always like this uniform here. Now, did you know that during the United States Civil War, officially there was only two medals, the Medal of Honor and the Purple Heart? But I guess they decided to give Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain a bunch of other medals that didn't exist at the time, or they awarded them later. I don't know. Very strange image. And then there's no shortage of reunions that you have. Here's Little Round Top. I think this is the early 1900s when the veterans rallied there. What's with this symbol back here? Not exactly a symbol that's traditionally associated with the United States Army, is it? What are your thoughts on that? Yeah, he does kind of look like Colonel Sanders, doesn't he? And not the Colonel Sanders from Spaceballs either. Oh, yeah. Before Sam Elliott made it cool, or so we're told, although then Sam Elliott brought it back. And coincidentally, he played General Buford in Gettysburg, because you can't do a Civil War movie without, yeah, exactly, easy money. Definitely looks Wehrmacht, or German Defense Force at best. Ah, there you go. I knew you guys were going to get onto it. Yeah, that's right, Robert. And we do have these strange celebrations at that time, right around 1900. You might remember that monument we saw in Louisville when we did that exploration. So very, very strange. Yeah, they call it a Maltese cross, Heidi, although who knows for sure. It comes up a lot, so it's just hard to say. Anyway, back on to fantastic accounts. And so this is what Little Round Top looked like during the battle. Now, you might see there's a lot of vegetation around here. You do not have clear fields of fire at the summit of this hill. Now, I can't verify this picture was actually taken at the top of Little Round Top after the battle. We're said that it was, although they cleaned it up pretty well. So I'm not really sure. And then this is looking up at Little Round Top. And again, just very strange terrain. I mean, we got some trees, but the mighty battle, of course, towards the top, you see there's a lot of foliage. So if you're going to put guns up there, you got to clear that foliage if you're going to fire on the Union position and dominate it. It's really strange. Again, more conflicting accounts. All right. So what was the actual objectives of the Civil War? Conflict, assimilation, and indoctrination. Yeah, exactly, Maxwell Smart. You don't need a field of fire, just shoot through it. Now, back on the topic of conflict, indoctrination, and assimilation. And that's one of it's basically the three-way pattern that's still used to this day. You get a conflict going, the survivors are assimilated, and they're indoctrinated. And anybody who doesn't fall into those two, well, you know how they usually end up. Now, we're told that these are Confederate prisoners after the Battle of Gettysburg, and they decided to pose very nicely for this photograph. Yeah, we got somebody else doing the Commander Riker knee pose up here. I'm not sure what's with that. We got the proud-looking gentleman back here. It's really bizarre, though. Now, this is supposedly from a train that exploded with ammunition on it. And I guess it destroyed the building as well. This is supposedly near Atlanta. But then again, look at the terrain around here. It's just really bizarre. And so it all goes along with that whole notion. I mean, are they just destroying it or what? Yeah. Yep, very true, unfortunately. Just unleash it, and there you go. You've got it all done and ready to go. So look at some of these others. I mean, here we go. Looks like we got Howdy Doody here. What kind of uniform is he wearing? Is he wearing the plaid? Is he part of the plaid infantry corps, the Confederate infantry? Or is this a latter image? I mean, we're told this from the Civil War. Or was he one of the knife specialists? Very interesting knife there. I mean, is it supposed to be a bayonet? Little pistol there? I have no idea what's going on. Really strange. And more battlefield drawings, like Johnny Depp said in Pirates of the Caribbean, it is a drawing of a key. Well, we have a drawing of a battle, and apparently that's all we need. I like this. Random individuals just running around out here, and we got the cannons blasting. Well, there you go. We just redeemed Ridley Scott and Napoleon. It really was possible. You just line up the cannons, and people just run in front of them, and then they shoot them with the cannons. That's how it works. Look, we got a sketch of it. It's proven. Sarcasm meter maxed out if you can't figure it out. And here's another image of that interesting gondola. I think we can see a casket in here. Nice light. Lincoln's funeral procession. But again, going back to that notion of conflict, assimilation, indoctrination. So, yeah, very, very interesting. I have looked in the Boxer Rebellion, and I'm sorry, I'm not being as responsive with comments as I normally am because I want to make sure that I stay focused here for a little bit of a change. But yeah, it's in the Reset War Explorations. If you look at that playlist, we do talk about the Boxer Rebellion. I believe it's all part of the same conflict. Good one. Yep. Individual movement techniques, right, Sooner West? And then they dropped them once the so-called global war on terror started, because then you're wearing interceptor body armor, which is too freaking heavy to do 3 to 5 second buddy rushes, right? Or low crawl or high crawl. All right. So let's actually go on here. Stay focused. Okay. Conflict, assimilation, indoctrination. Now, I think this tells the best picture of what was really going on. You have an army camp here right outside of a town. And so if you have an expeditionary military force that's actually occupying a town that may or may not be alive, or it might even be a dead town, which I think it's very likely a lot of the towns were dead because they're very overgrown, then maybe what you're really seeing here is that occupation. And any of the residents, you have two choices. You either come with us, assimilate and indoctrinate, or you die right here or now. Or you get to go to one of the relocation camps, or as they called them after the war, asylums. So I think there's a lot that supports that theory. But like I said, I could be wrong. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and there's a lot of actual support for it because of the tactics and how they were really operating. And I think this is one of the pictures that does support that. Now, again, could I be wrong? Absolutely. Could be wrong about it all. All right, the Carrington event. So let's go to final theories here, or actual evidence. So evidence, the Carrington event, or lack of one. For those of you who don't know or haven't heard of it, the Carrington event was a solar storm that occurred in 1859. It shot a lot of the telegraph operators, and many of them unplugged their machines, and they still operated. Now, what's interesting about the Carrington event, though, is we've got some paintings of it. We got some drawings of it. Did it really happen? Did it really happen the way that we're told it did? We don't know. Could this have actually been a reference to the last reset and whatever the heck happened with that? Or cymatics run amok and then causing all kinds of magnetic disruptions in the atmosphere? It could have been all that. It could have been none of that. When you actually try to reference it in periodicals at the time, it becomes very difficult to do so, the Carrington event. We're told that it happened, but did it? It supposedly influenced a lot of paintings at the time. You know, you have this beautiful aurora borealis effect from it because of all the magnetic forces that were in the atmosphere. But I suspect that the Carrington event is something that did happen. Yeah, it could have been, or it could have been some other sort of weapon. I mean, we got to think beyond just directed energy weapons because we have evidence that they could have had everything, even worse things than directed energy weapons. Clearly weapons that had a lot more of a controlled destructive potential behind them. So in other words, the trouble with what we think of as nuclear weapons, they just destroy everything. So what good are they? But if you have a weapon that could destroy a house and then you change a setting on it and you can destroy a city, you can see why that weapon would be a lot more effective to maintaining control. So, but yeah, we don't know. Was it the sun? Was it something else? We don't know. I mean, if you want to accept that history, that's fine. Be my guest. But I think there's a lot more to it than what we're told. There's portions of it that are true, what they saw, but then it's an obscured account. Yeah, it could have been all that. And I think there's a high possibility that they actually possess those kind of weapons because talking about their destructive potential, how they could change it. If you could change a setting on your weapon to destroy a house and then the next day destroy a city with the same weapon, imagine what you could do with that. Ah, yes, the resonant dissonator. Good one. I forgot about that. Oh, maybe. And you know, there could be a divine aspect to it as well. I mean, I'm just throwing out theories here right now. So Carrington event's interesting and it gets a lot of attention. It is very hard, though, to reference it in the time, but as we know, that doesn't prove anything. In other words, if you look at newspaper articles, you wouldn't even know there was a Carrington event from 1859. I've tried to reference it and I've tried to back it up, and it's very hard to do so. Yeah, Operation Fishbowl, detonating nuclear weapons in the atmosphere is what we're told they did, Abrams killer, but who knows if that really happened, as we're told. Maybe they were doing something else, testing some other kind of weapon, and then they just said, oh, yeah, we were testing nuclear weapons because that's what everybody was doing at that time. So anyway, so it's really hard to tell what was going on with the Carrington event. I mean, we've got our usual spectrometer analysis or whatever gauge and readout that we have that tells you that something happened. But, you know, we've also got that with a wow signal back in the 1970s. So I don't know, you know, Carrington event and aliens. I'm being facetious. You know, and then you have your old telegraph operator, although I was always curious as to what exactly powered these machines at the same time. Maybe you can answer that question. There's all sorts of cheetah flips when it comes to intellectually explaining the presence of the telegraph. And of course, this is the high time of it. Ah, yes, precisely. And again, something that we just don't know. Okay, moving on. This is a real favorite image of mine because this is supposedly the morning to President Lincoln. Let me make sure I got my right heading up here. And this is where you really see what's ominously going on. A lot of people don't know about this, the Lincoln 10% plan and forced relocation. So I'll get to that in a second. But I find it funny that they say that they put these black marks around the columns as mourning to President Lincoln. I mean, we got the flag half-staffed, completed Capitol. Really strange in and of itself. And we got our good old staff picture here. I believe that's supposed to be General Hooker. Looks like he's having a real bad hair day. I don't know, very odd. And then, of course, our photo of the damage the cannons did. Now, this is what we'd expect to see, but would the cannonballs even be able to do that? Probably not, given how inaccurate they were. Okay, so the 10% plan, a lot of people aren't aware of this. And this was Lincoln's plan to reintegrate the South that came out in 1863, according to official history. And here were the conditions behind it. You must swear an oath of loyalty to the United States, and you must agree slavery is illegal. And here are more of the provisions of it. So a state would hold a constitutional convention, one of the Confederate states or the border states, and resume participating in the Union only after 10% of the voters in the state swore allegiance to the Union. And then they would offer a pardon to any Confederate who would take an oath of allegiance, blah, 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 blah. But bottom line up front, what that tells you is Lincoln's real plan. Why on earth would this ever fly? 10%? You'd only need 10% of the voters and you're going to call that democracy? Oh, yes. And don't worry, I'm going to post all the pictures in the usual places that are the most interesting ones. A lot of people don't even know about the 10% plan. And it was supposed to be the actual approach to reintegrate the Union. But if you think about it, if they're actually a foreign expeditionary force and they're occupying all this land, then if it makes more sense that they're just saying that, oh, 10% of the population is going along with it, and the rest of you just surrender. You have no option. I mean, what makes more sense? Because if they were just trying to preserve the Union, then how could they destroy democracy in the South if they were honestly going to reintegrate the Southern states, according to the official history? You know, and it's one of those things that I always questioned about the official Civil War history, because nobody talks about the 10% plan. And I don't think Ken Burns mentioned it all in the Civil War, so you may as well say it didn't happen. If Ken Burns didn't talk about it, it may as well not happen. Just bear with me for a second. Let me get these next images up here to take a look at the soldiers' homes from last exploration. So let's get that up. Share screen. Okay. So you might recall the soldiers' homes, and that goes back into the exploration that we did of the compounds. Oh, yeah. All right, well, we'll get the poll going. So, oh, thanks, RB. I appreciate that. I have. And, you know, I need to follow up on the explorations on the Badlands. So thanks for bringing that up, Jamie. So this is the one in Milwaukee, and we're told officially that these soldiers' homes were for veterans to recover after the Civil War. So they needed to have this nice, large castle complex, and I explored this very early in the channel. We'll look at some others. But it's not just the United States. This is one in London, actually, a soldier's home. Yeah, just all the trapments you need for a soldier's home. So it wasn't with the United States in the Civil War. They had them in England, Britain. This is Leavenworth in Kansas. Nice structures in a compound here. Of course, everybody knows that Leavenworth is now the home of the disciplinary barracks, the United States military. Oh, yeah, that's a good one, I'm Kairos. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, they're all over the place. I mean, all over the land, too, not just the United States. So why in the heck did they need soldiers' homes in Great Britain? They didn't have a civil war there in the 1800s. It was a lot earlier, so the official history says. Yeah, exactly. Let's look at some more. This is that one in the United Kingdom. Yeah, very beautiful. Not sure what these symbols are about. But I'm just showing you that they're everywhere. I think, I'm trying to remember where this one is. I think this is New Hampshire, maybe. I could be wrong. Couldn't find records on all of them, but yeah, let's put a cannon in front of the soldiers' home. Remind the soldiers about war. That's always a good thing. When we're told this is for soldiers that suffered from shell shock. Well, actually, they called it, I think they just called it something that they needed mental treatment from, and they threw them in an asylum. Or they were the ones who didn't go along with what was going on after the Civil War. This is one from South Dakota. Look how well built this is. Nice little slant construction there. And you need a couple towers, and who knows what material this actually is. We'll be told it's maybe it's Anamosa limestone. That stuff gets around, you know, that stuff in eastern Iowa. Here's the Iowa Soldiers' Home in Marshalltown, Iowa. And you might remember that's where we explored that tornado bulletproof courthouse in Marshalltown. They got some really nice structures there. Of course, they needed a soldiers' home in Iowa. 10% of their population fought in the Civil War. Or was there something else going on? But I mean, you have these, again, massive compounds, likely repurposed afterwards. Oh, yeah. Yeah, and you're definitely right about Fort Jefferson. I'm Kairos. Might have to see if we can do maybe a live stream on some of those installations. And that's where I developed that theory from, is realizing they had all these asylums all over the place, and yet these are all old world buildings. So what else would they be? Now, could they have had some different function that we don't know of at the end of the Fourth Era civilization? Sure, but it seems like they were repurposed to be a survival compound. Could be completely wrong on that, but just all something to look at. Look at this firing squad, Iowa Soldiers' Home. And you might recall the Iowa soldiers got their big monument at the Iowa State Capitol. They finished it in 1895 for the Civil War veterans of Iowa. But then they didn't dedicate it until World War II, when I think these were the only ones left. I don't think these were the same soldiers left, but I think there were only 6 of them left out of the 70,000 Iowans that served in the Civil War, according to the official account. Nice built building, too. Yeah, look at these guys. I mean, oh boy, this guy just looks really sad. And it breaks my heart because you're really wondering what exactly were these individuals through. I mean, was it just a war or was it something else? Were they interred here? That's always something I've suspected, especially when you look at them, because you can always see that soldiers have pride, but you can also see that some of them don't always. So it just kind of breaks my heart a little bit seeing that. Here's a nice one in Scotland. Look at that full reset compound. Lovely towers too. So again, showing you it's elsewhere as well. Who knows? Maybe you'll see Tommy Flanagan walking around up there. This is the United States Soldiers' Home in Washington, D.C. This beauty still stands today. Looks more like a church, doesn't it? Yeah, because they had all kinds of money. They just built these things right after the Civil War. Yeah, exactly. Good question there, Jamie. Good question. I mean, a little morbid, but yeah, we're told there were so many amputees from the Civil War, but they didn't seem to be around after that, did they? Yeah, Magisterium, no doubt about it. See, this is Michigan. Okay, so that was Michigan earlier. New Hampshire, Michigan. I'm not perfect. I don't try to be. This is in Marshalltown again. So everybody's got their nice top hats on. I mean, what the heck is going on here? This is just really bizarre. I mean, are they doing a commemoration formation here, a memorial formation? Looks like it. But I don't know. Is there something else more pernicious going on? It's hard to say. See the tower in the background there. This is in Marshalltown, 1912, right before World War I. Here's one of the Confederate ones in Louisville. Excuse me, Louisville. Let me make sure I say that right. Got a nice little dome tower on this doozy. Nice, comfortable place, you know. Why don't we have these nice castles for our veterans today? We should build these all over the place. This is a very interesting one. I think this is in Kansas. Check this out. Really unique. Guess they converted it into a church, and that's why they threw a cross on it, but hard to say what's really going on here with this one. I haven't quite seen a structure like that. Yeah, good point, Paul. During World War I, that supposedly happened, the Christmas truce. I'm going to put a stop to that right away. See if I got any more. Oh, so here's another angle of the Milwaukee one. I miss this fountain because I always love to get these fountains too. Yeah, and they always have it fenced off because they're constantly renovating it. And this was the one that was designed by our good friend E. Townsend Mix. Maybe he needed Sidney Mason Stone to help him do it too. And Canvas White. Oh, all these names are just so funny. Here's the main building at Marshalltown in Iowa. These nice foundation stones or whatever it's made out of. Kind of reminds me of Cat Hall at Iowa State University, where I was politely asked to leave there. Kidding. I'm kidding. Let's go on to the next one here. So yeah, just a really strange structure. I mean, why would anybody design something like this for a soldier's home? I mean, it's a beautiful building. They call it an old main building, but you also have the old main buildings on the college campuses. You also have them on the mental asylums. And so that's what really prompted my theory that these compounds that are all centered around one building had a very different function originally. Here's the one at Dayton, Ohio. We looked at this last week, but a little bit better of a bird's eye view of it. What the heck is going on here with a smokestack? You look at just how advanced some of these buildings are. And again, something else they just threw up right after the Civil War. In addition to all the county courthouses, the state capitol, another smokestack there. Nice little dome up there. Look at that. Very impressive. And so that's why I get this impression, and this was the building we looked at last week, you might remember. All these buildings in one location, all these beautiful old world buildings. I mean, unless we really want to believe that they threw all this stuff up right after the United States Civil War, because, you know, as we said, they just had infinite money, infinite resources. It was no problem. Oh, yeah. Yeah, don't worry. I'm going to post all these on the Reddit along with many of the other pictures so you can explore on your own and come to your own conclusions. So, yeah, it may be. But there are numerous other images of these buildings, so we can assume that at some point some of them existed or they didn't. So, yeah, exactly, RB. I agree. Just because of all the effort that went into it. This is one in Hampton, Virginia. Nice little dome on top of it. Yeah, you always need your little dome. 1905. Oh, it's not a photo, it's a rotograph. We didn't have photographs, we had rotographs. Look that up. That's a fun little exploration, too. Well, you know, Charlotte, Vanilla Skies, that's how you show it's real. Yeah, I think they were. Well, welcome aboard. See if I got any more. This is an interesting one. And this is North Dakota. Really, really odd because, North Dakota wasn't exactly a state during the Civil War. But why let that stop you? You know, maybe it was a soldier's home for the North Dakota veterans later. Very, very odd. I mean, the whole story behind North and South Dakota is interesting in and of itself. Very short timeline with massive population growth, too, in those two states. Looks like a very pretty compound, though. And I'm sure it was for whatever its intended purpose was. You know, where'd you be without your little water tower? Oh, here's the New Hampshire one. Just looks like a nice big old mansion that they built up for them. Yeah, so again, why aren't we doing this for our veterans today? This is in South Carolina. Yeah, it's funny how quickly they populated Dakota, isn't it? Oh boy. Maybe. Or maybe it was what they had available when they did. I mean, it's really interesting when you see how they mix it all together. So, oh, yeah. But anyway, I think that's pretty much everything that I had for a second look at the Civil War. What are your thoughts?
I'd love to stay, but